Are you enjoying this podcast? Well, you have KUOW members to thank for that. KUOW members make the trusted local journalism and storytelling you hear on this show possible. Become a member today and help support the production of this podcast. It only takes a minute. Make a donation at KUOW.org or follow the link in the show notes. And thanks.
You're listening to Soundside on KUOW. I'm Diana Opong. The political landscape is shifting rapidly this week. Just days after President Biden announced he would not seek re-election, the Democratic Party is getting in line behind the Veep. According to an Associated Press survey, Vice President Kamala Harris has earned enough delegate support to become the Democratic nominee for the president. And now, as she takes center stage, the spotlight on Harris has intensified, and the floodgate of criticism from Republicans has opened. Some of these attacks have focused on what you'd expect, like her work on immigration or the Biden administration's record on inflation. But some notable criticism has also focused on factors outside of the vice president's control, her race and gender. On Monday, Republican Representative Tim Burchett of Tennessee called Harris our DEI vice president in a post on X. DEI as in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the Washington State GOP posted yesterday on the same platform that Harris was unqualified to lead, adding, quote, meritocratic DEI is not building back better. It's setting us further back. With the first Black and Asian woman and only the second woman ever headed to be the nominee of a major national political party, how will racist and sexist tropes play a role in this campaign season? And how are Black and Asian women gearing up to confront them? Joining me to talk about this and more and the rapidly shifting political landscape in Washington is Washington State Congresswoman Marilyn Strickland. Strickland represents the 10th Congressional District, which covers parts of Pierce and Thurston counties. She also serves as whip for the Congressional Black Caucus. Representative Strickland, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me here today.
It's been a wild couple of weeks for political news. What's it been like for you?
So last weekend, I spent so much time in chats on the phone and just really talking about the state of the presidential election. Obviously, when President Biden made the announcement on Sunday, things changed very dramatically. And I think about the fact that he made the announcement, which was about 10:30 Pacific time, when I was actually leaving a Get Out the Vote canvassing event. And, within 24 to 48 hours, Vice President Harris set records with fundraising. So the dynamic definitely shifted. There's a lot of energy and interest. And so we are here right now. As you mentioned earlier, she has enough pledged delegates to become our nominee, but we know that this will be an uphill battle.
Unlike some of your fellow Washington representatives, like Congressman Adam Smith, you didn't call for President Biden to step down from the race for president. Most of your fellow members of the Congressional Black Caucus stuck by Biden. Were you disappointed or surprised when Biden announced he would be stepping down?
So I always said that I was riding with Biden-Harris, and if the president decided he was going to step down, Vice President Harris would be the natural successor. I said that a week ago because, there was a lot of scrum about this on Capitol Hill. And, the Congressional Black Caucus stood firm with President Biden. And so when he made the announcement on Sunday, it was surprising, but we also knew that we had a plan.
And you've since endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris for the nomination. And like you said, it sounds like it was an easy decision for you because that was the goal within the Congressional Black Caucus, is to just support support the Democratic ticket.
Absolutely. And, when a president chooses a vice president, the assumption is that the vice president can take over as commander-in-chief if something happens. And so any conversations about she's not qualified or whatever tropes we're throwing out there is simply not true. She has served admirably for 3.5 years. We've recovered from a pandemic. Our economy is strong right now, even though there is some, price sensitivity. And at the same time, she's the most qualified candidate. That is the reason I'm supporting her.
And you brought up some critiques. Harris has faced critique from both sides of the aisle in the past. She's been called a cop and not progressive enough on crime by some Democrats. And conservatives have said that she didn't do enough to stem immigration from Central America as the vice president. What do you see as Harris's biggest challenges in this race?
So obviously it's going to be the racism and the sexism because her critics have nothing else to criticize her about. She was the district attorney of San Francisco. She was the attorney general for the state of California. And she is leaning into the fact that she was the person who was prosecuting criminals. And at the same time, she was coming up with programs to deal with some of the injustices in the justice system. But I can't think of a better person to prosecute the case against Donald Trump, who he himself is a criminal. So, we're going to talk about what Harris has done. We're going to talk about her track record of success. We're going to talk about the things that have actually gone very well for the Biden-Harris administration. And also, too, watch her prosecute the case against Donald Trump. I hear he's already trying to back out of a debate. So that tells you how scared they are of her.
And you've received a number of comparisons to Vice President Harris over the years. You were elected in 2020, the same year as the VP. And like Harris, your nomination made history as the first Black Korean woman elected to a national office. You're also the first Black woman ever elected to the U.S. House of Representatives here in Washington state in our history. What challenges do you think Harris will face as a Black Asian woman running for the highest office in the country, specifically related to sexist and racist tropes?
It's interesting when you talk about this, and I say this as someone who shares the same heritage as the vice president, Black and Asian. And, for some people in this country, when they think about power and leadership, it doesn't necessarily look like us. And we have proven that we typically are overqualified when we decide to pursue something. And so it was an honor for you to make history, and I'm excited about Vice President Harris and this campaign that she's going to run. She has a lot of wind behind her back, a lot of support. And you've probably seen online or even in the press the amount of energy that she is having right now. Young people are excited about her. The Obama coalition is getting back together. And this whole conversation about, she's too this or not enough that, that's pretty typical when you're mixed race to hear that from people all over the place. But at the end of the day, she's the most qualified. Her ethnicity, her gender, those are assets. Those are good things about her. And when I hear some folks say, well, she's a DEI hire, I said, well, she's not. She is qualified. She's been a district attorney. She's been an attorney general. She was part of the U.S. Senate, and she's been vice president for 3.5 years. A person who would be a diversity hire is maybe a failed businessman with no elected experience who's been impeached twice and is a convicted felon.
Aaron McIntyre, a pundit on the far-left media platform Blaze, stated that Democrats are, quote, literally going to spend the next few months running the DEI candidate and calling everyone who opposes her sexist Hitler. What's your response to how this DEI phrase is being weaponized in this election? As you mentioned, her race and gender are assets, but in some people's eyes, it's not.
It's interesting because this assault on DEI has been happening in this particular Congress, the 118th. And if you look at some of the policies that they have tried to put forward, taking DEI out of our military academies, trying to weaponize it as though we are promoting people who are less qualified. And I said this in one of our hearings on the House Armed Services Committee. DEI is something that is part of the 21st century. And being inclusive creates organizations that are stronger and more effective. If you look at the U.S. military, for example, 40% of the people who are enlisted are people of color. And so DEI is being weaponized because there's this trope that it's taking something away from someone who's more qualified. I don't know of anyone who's more qualified to be the President of the United States at this moment in time than Vice President Kamala Harris. And so if DEI is the only thing you can say about her and you can't even talk about her record or what she's accomplished, it says that your argument is weak.
We're going to stay on this for just one more moment, Representative Strickland. We're also seeing it in the conversation after the assassination attempt of Donald Trump on Monday. Republican Representative Tim Burchett of Tennessee called Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle a quote-unquote DEI horror story during a hearing by the House Oversight Committee. Cheadle has since resigned. Is every woman and person of color in a high-profile job going to get this phrase used against them here on in? Will this just be the norm now? And honestly, has it ever not been the norm?
It's interesting how they just throw that term around all the time as though that's the reason something went wrong. And, I want to ask the question to Mr. Burchett. So if you're not a man and if you're not white, are you automatically considered a DEI hire? That is ridiculous. And so, again, they will try to weaponize this and make it something that is negative when, in fact, her identity, her background, her accomplishments, those are all assets that make her a strong candidate. As you know, Democrats have a very, very large tent, and we represent all parts of the Democratic Party ideology. We represent people from all walks of life, all backgrounds. And to be honest with you, that's what makes this country great. If you are running around trying to weaponize people's identities and make them feel bad for being who they are, I call that a losing strategy.
Let's move on to talking about organizational efforts, especially among Black women right now. On Sunday, after Biden announced he was stepping down and endorsing the VP, 44,000 Black women organizers joined in a Zoom led by a group called Win with Black Women. In 3 hours, the group raised $1.6 million. Were you on that call?
I was not on that call, but I was very proud to see us all come together. And then subsequently, last night, there was a call with African-American men, and they also raised a lot of money as well. And so I think what this says is that there is enthusiasm for this candidate. I believe there will be a call sometime this week with the Asian-American women. And so I just think that, different groups that are enthusiastic about this candidate are getting together and saying, when we mobilize, when we show up, when we vote, when we help our candidate, we can win.
And what role do you think Black and Asian women specifically will play in this year's election?
One of the things that I often say to people is that Black women are the backbone of the Democratic Party. Of all the demographics, Black women are likely to vote for a Democrat at least 96% of the time. So the first thing I say is, let's go with the people who we know represent our base. I also believe, too, there's a level of excitement because Kamala Harris is also half Asian. Mm-hmm. And so I think you're getting, two core constituencies excited about this candidate, having conversations about what she can do. And I also want to, point something out, too, because we talked about women in this role. One of the things that women have to realize of all political persuasions, even Republican women, is that the Project 2025 agenda seeks to take away women's rights. It will undo everything we have fought for the past 50 years. And I think about abortion access. I think about the ability to work overtime and get paid for it. I think about the Department of Education. These are all issues that women have a very strong vested interest in. So while we're talking about African-American women and Asian women who care deeply about these issues I just mentioned, all women should be worried about what a Donald Trump administration will do and what their plan is with Project 2025.
And how do you see these developments reshaping the national conversation about the future of American leadership and the Democratic Party's strategy moving forward, using all of these different groups and empowering all of these different communities to rally behind Vice President Harris? Do you see sort of a reshaping of the national conversation?
Well, think about the conversation that we were having just a week ago about the presidential election. Mm-hmm. Joe Biden became the topic of the election. We weren't talking about policy and vision and what we were trying to do. President Biden has served this country well for decades. We owe him a debt of gratitude for getting us out of the pandemic, for passing an infrastructure bill, for restoring American manufacturing, all the things that he has done so well. One of the most, the most consequential president of my lifetime. But with that said, we want to talk about what the future looks like. His decision to step down shows that he is a patriot who loves his country and is putting his nation before his own needs. So by doing that, he's saying, okay, let's pass the baton. And, he was enthusiastic about Vice President Harris. He endorsed her within 30 minutes of making the announcement that he was stepping down. And he's going to be there with her every step of the way throughout this campaign to make sure that she wins. And so it's a very nice changing of the guard. America itself is changing. We think about what the power structure looked like 20 years ago or even a decade ago. Mm-hmm. More people are running for office at the local, state, and federal level. More people are getting into the game because it shows that we can actually win. And I think for some people, and this is human nature, people fear change. And sometimes people see change and they think that something's being taken away from them. Mm-hmm. But we know that when we have diverse leadership, when we have people from all walks of life, and ask corporate America this question, we make better decisions and it's better for the entire country. And at the end of the day, we all want to be safe. We want to be secure. We want to love our families. We want to be able to put food on the table. All these basic things that we all associate with the American dream, the ability to retire with dignity. And so I believe that Vice President Harris has the vision for that to make it happen. I believe that when Democrats are in charge, and this is true, it's factual, the economy is stronger, wages are up, unemployment is down. We are going to do what we can to deal with inflation because I don't want to ignore that topic. But it's really a conversation about what is the promise of this nation and how do we fulfill our obligation and what we say we want to do in the Constitution.
Congresswoman Marilyn Strickland represents Washington State's 10th Congressional District and serves as whip for the Congressional Black Caucus. Thanks so much for making time to speak with me today.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. This show is only possible because listeners support us. If you're able to give right now, please check out the show notes for a link to donate. And don't forget, you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m., Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org.